Emerson, but he didn't meet Mr. Emerson as he met his own son. His son takes the letter and reads it with a disturbed expression. Emerson's son gives the narrator the letter to read by himself, from which he discovers that Dr. Bledsoe has told each of the addressees that the narrator has been permanently expelled and that he wrote in his letter under false pretense to protect the college. You can imagine. So he has been carrying a letter of expulsion to all the addressees. Somehow Mr. Emerson came and saw the way the things was and finally decided to help the narrator get a job at the Liberty Paint plant. At the end, the narrator leaves angrily, but anyways, he has to take the job. He's a black. So the narrator arrives at Liberty Paint. Remember, Mr. Emerson helped him got a work there. On entering Liberty Paint, he sees a big, bold electric sign which reads, "Keep American Pure with Liberty Paint." The narrator's supervisor, Mr. Kimbrough, takes him to a room stocked with buckets of paint. Before his very eyes, the supervisor collects some portions of paint and mixes it up with other chemicals. He applies the paint on the wooden board and it becomes glossy, white, and dried. With this, he therefore brags to the narrator that the optic white of Liberty Paint is the purest white that can be found anywhere. So the narrator is sent to the furnace room to help an engineer named Lucius Brockway. The engineer declares that he does not need an assistant, but later puts the narrator to work anyway. The Mr. Brockway, on the other hand, asks the narrator to check the pressure gauge on the boiler. The company's slogan in the paint industry was, if it's optic white, it is the right white. Please, let's take note of this. The slogan, on the other hand, reminds the narrator of the saying in the South that if you are a white, then you are right. During the lunchtime, the narrator returns to the locker room to collect his lunch, where he interrupts a union of meeting. Some members accuse him of being an informant after hearing that he works for Mr. Brockway's assistants. The men decide to find out who he is and then allow him to take his lunch. On the other hand, when Brockway hears about the union meeting, he becomes angry and threatens to kill the narrator if he refuses to leave the plant. The narrator denies belonging to the union, so he was caught in between two groups, the union and Mr. Brockway. Brockway and the narrator begins to fight each other to the extent that the engineer bites the narrator because he was afraid of losing his job to the union members. As the narrator resumes work with Brockway, he is knocked down by an industrial boiler which explodes out of explosion. He becomes unconscious. Somehow, the narrator is able to wake up in a hospital where he sees a doctor. The doctor gives him something to swallow and he returns to unconsciousness again. Even when he regains his senses, he cannot figure out why he is in the hospital. The doctor places him on an electrical shock treatment, trying to resuscitate his consciousness. The doctor asks him many questions, including his name, and he could not understand anything. The narrator is able to respond to their questions only when they write on a paper asking him who he was. Bokie the rabbit, that was the kind of question white doctors were asking him. He admits to be the one. He becomes annoyed seeing that the doctors has hit him upon his old identity. Daring, the narrator learns that he is in a factory hospital. After all, the doctors declared him cured and asked him to sign some papers to receive his compensation check. We should note that even while the narrator was in the hospital, the doctors were trying to electrify his body to bring him back to consciousness, and when they saw that he has recovered, they kept electrifying his body and they were catching fun with him. And instead of asking him what's his name, they were asking him if he was a rabbit, which he had to just agree to so they could let him go. Somehow, the narrator leaves the hospital feeling as if an alien personality has taken hold of him. Finally, as the narrator leaves the subway in chapter 12, he collapses on the street. He is taken to the house of a black woman named Mary. By the time he wakes up, the woman asks him why he comes to New York from the south. He replies to Mary that he wants to be an educator. She quickly cautions him to be careful with the corrupting influence of the city. As he waits to leave, the black woman offers to give him a fairer rent beside the men's house. The narrator takes a room at Mary's apartment, who wishes him to take a leadership role of activism in the black community. In chapter 13, while the narrator bought some boiled yam or some baked yam on the street and walked past, he saw a crowd of people. He comes across a crowd, better word, who watched a white man evicting an old black couple. Having felt the couple, especially as their belongings are scattered everywhere, the narrator becomes angry and delivers a rousing speech that incites the black crowd to resistance. This old black couple happens to be Mr. Provo and his wife, his 87 years old wife. After his peaceful speech on black revolt, he was carefully observed by Brother Jack, who was actually among the crowd. Brother Jack watched as the narrator asked the crowd to help the black couple take their things back to their house, which the crowd did happily. On the other hand, the white man takes the narrator to a coffee house and tries to lure him to become a paid spokesman. It was at this point Brother Jack was introduced to the audience. After the narrator's refusal, Brother Jack dropped his number anyways. So we'll move to the chapter 14 of this book. So the narrator returns to Mary's apartment. He changes his mind. Remember, at first he said he wasn't going to agree to the proposal of Brother Jack. But he changes his mind, realizing that Mary has been the one feeding him since he has been freed from the factory hospital and since his paycheck finished. He calls the number that Jack gives him and then arranged to meet at the Tonia Hotel. There, Jack introduces to the narrator his mistress Emma. At this point, Emma is introduced to the readers. The mistress whispers to chapter 15 of this book. After the meeting with Brother Jack and his mistress Emma, the narrator goes back to Mary's apartment. At night, he notices some banging around the building as the heat was too much. Waking up, he discovers an image, or a very annoying image, of a black, and he wonders why Mary would hate a black so much. In annoyance, he breaks the picture. Upon realizing what he has done, he tried to hide the figurine, but Mary was already approaching the door. He goes to the kitchen and after listening to Mary's talk, pays her $100 bill for his rent and all the food he has been eating in her house. Later, he joins her for coffee and leaves without telling Mary that he will not be returning. Thereafter, he buys an expensive suit and accessories before contacting Mr. Jack. The $100 he gave to Mary was given to him by Mr. Jack. Are you seeing it? So he was able to pay her up and then buy some good things for himself. We move. Chapter 16. He meets with Brother Jack, who drives him to the brotherhood gathering. They tell him to hold on to his speech until the crowd is being frenzied. As the narrator climbs the stage, the spotlight blinds him temporarily, and while the crowd is singing "No more dispossessing of the disposed," taking the microphone, the narrator says that they have disposed each of us. He started his speech with that. You can imagine the crowd shouting, "No more dispossessing of disposed," and the narrator just started with, "They are disposing each of us." So everybody's like, wow, what does he have to say? Of an idea for making them to be blind. He urges the crowd to regain their sight and to work together so they can see both sides of the streets. Wow, the crowd was stunned. At the end of his speech, There was a thunderous applause. Some members of the Brotherhood criticized his speech for its inflammatory effects. They decided to take the narrator to Brother Hambro to nurture his talent of public speaking in line with the Brotherhood ideology. They wanted him, why anytime he makes a speech, he should uphold the Brotherhood. Are you seeing it? But in everything he said, there was no place of uplifting the Brotherhood. So Brother Hambro, as it were, was to teach him what it means to talk or to be a public speaker of the Brotherhood Harlem. So the narrator returns home feeling like a new person, totally different from the one who was expelled from the college and the one who was tortured in the hospital by the white. He was feeling like a hero, not minding his pride and triumph, but somehow his grandfather's prophecy just came to mind. Keep that nigger boy running.